You want to just kind of wing it and to get that kind of organic flow going.
I mean, I usually wing it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
Okay. Oh well, yeah. I'll just say I'll just start with them. Content warning: the plot of this game this month involves abuse, self-harm, sexual assault, and suicide. I mean not to dwell on those subjects, but the game is pretty in your face about it if you play it. And thank you for coming out to this corner of the internet. World Revolution is a podcast dedicated to indie RPGs and funded by viewers like you. That's not true, we don't make any money, I just wanted to say that. Our this approximate month, our game is Standstill Girl, a tragic RPG released in 2011. It's a very clean video game with a unique battle system that it leverages to tell a story of responsibility and self-actualization. What do you think of the game, John?
I liked it. That was a good way of putting it. Good kind of elevator pitch
Oh,
there.
the little blurb, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good at that. Let me write copy for your game. Just kidding, you're not gonna hire me for that. But
Actually, I might pay. All right. I might do that.
okay, well, like back in, what was it? I think it was high school. I was just writing one paragraph reviews of every game I played just for myself, and I got really good at just like really punchy. What is this game about in one paragraph?
I love that. That's excellent.
I, so I mean, I still use that pointless skill to this day.
It's a good skill.
Yeah, maybe.
I think another thing to note is that this is another game in the psychic trauma boss rush nightmare exploration game genre.
That's a genre.
Yeah.
What are other games in that genre?
Well, I mean, I guess Mittens.
Yeah, Mittens. Mittens is like
Persona 4.
Persona 4 is like
Yep.
that. Is Off like that? I haven't played Off.
Not really. I don't think it's explicitly a psychic space like in Persona 4 in this game. And I guess that Mittens isn't either, but whatever.
Mittens compared to this game is a really gross comparison, actually.
Yeah, this
Uh,
game's better.
yeah, that's what John ended up coming away from. Is here's a game that doesn't it doesn't have a lot of disclaimers in front of it besides the content warning. That's a disclaimer, but
Yeah, all right. How about this? Here's a good starting point. All right, so there's a framing device where you're in like the end of time, basically the timekeeper's place where there are these shadow people and the warden who exist outside of time, and they're in charge of making sure that time flows naturally and everything is going well. And then the big clock that shows that time is going well breaks, and the only way to fix it is to gather the fragments of the clock's hands. And that entails your silent protagonist avatar journeying into 5 different dungeons, basically, that represent her memories, and basically being confronted with those lost memories and retrieving the clock hands. Then there's a climax and shit.
yeah, and it is an RPG with battles.
Yes, it is an RPG with battles and random battles, like
Yeah,
leveling up and shit. It's a lot.
it's all solo. You're just playing as Alice the whole time.
Yeah, it's a single player RPG, kind of like it's a lot like Helen's Mysterious Castle, I think.
That's probably a better comparison because I haven't played that, and I was like, huh, it's like Dragon Quest.
Yeah, it's like Dragon Quest One. It's like or Parasite Eve. There's lots of games with single player, single people, and where it's a lot of watching meters like trickle down between the two characters and kind of doing math on the fly to figure out what your next move should be. Like, there's not a lot of randomness, which is something I really appreciate. It's something that Helen's Mysterious Castle does too.
Except the randomness and what skills you learn, but
Oh, I didn't. I had no idea how. I didn't engage with that system at all. I just kind of went with whatever I got.
well, I didn't really either because it's you can't really figure it out. But it's like I want to say it's like a Saga game, except I can't think of a Saga game that does it.
Hmm.
But you get skills at random based on the skills you use in battle, based on the skills you get hit in battle, and based on I think like how low HP you finish battles, how often you do the stuff like that. Milestones like those, Alice will learn new abilities based on how she's fighting.
Yeah, the library has some hints to that effect. It's a little area in the hub at the beginning of the game, but they're like smudgy and a lot of the text is blurred out. It's kind of cute.
But actually playing the game, you're not going to figure any of that out.
Yeah, but you don't have to because it's not that hard
Yeah,
ultimately.
yeah, it's not that hard, kind of.
Yeah, I got What was your arc with the difficulty?
Um, like the first three dungeons, it was really hard,
Hmm.
but after that, you get to a point where you just need to like you figure out a really good strategy, or you grind up Alice to a point where you can kind of just sleep through the rest of the game.
That was basically my arc. I got the there's an accessory that gives you 1.5 EXP basically.
Yeah.
And once I caught that near the end of the second dungeon for me, and then like the second dungeon was hard. No, in the third dungeon, and then the second dungeon was really hard, and the first dungeon was really hard, and then after that I was okay for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I also wore the circlet the whole game, which
Yeah, that trivializes things, I think.
I had no trouble with anything until I tried to do the extra boss at the end.
Mm. Let's see. There's one extra boss that I didn't beat. One there's a dragon and a whale, and I didn't beat the whale because it does like a move where it kills you instantly as it dies, and I got an accessory that would let me block that, I think, but I didn't go back to do it.
It's actually, or is it literally when it dies, or it's when it's at low HP?
One of those.
I feel like I fought that boss, and what I did was charged an attack that would just obliterate its last quarter of HP,
Ah, smart.
and then they wouldn't trigger the I beat you move.
Yeah. I thought Helen's Mysterious Castle was smarter and better balanced. It kind of kept it had the arc throughout the game was a little bit more tight, I think. Although they're both very kind games in that they let you grind. There aren't any big consequences for dying. Like I appreciate that.
I mean, I like that the Standstill Girl start out really hard and then kind of folds over because like you're fighting monsters apparently, but it's like really metaphorical and allegorical.
Hmm.
And so as Alice like as Alice becomes like more like stronger mentally and personally, then she's not struggling in her memories anymore, right?
Yeah, that's a good thought.
So yeah, I thought that lines up pretty well, even if it like the last couple dungeons are kind of boring to play through because you're just pressing one attack and the enemy's gone.
Yeah, all the dungeons are like the places are frozen in time, hence the title. So that kind of ties into like a structure thing where like I just went through the dungeons in the hub from right to left, which meant that the story was told linearly, her backstory. You can take them on in any order though, which was kind of funny because just the order that I went with, I got the linear version of the story. So it's funny to be like, oh, I could have just gotten this out of order and more confusing.
Yeah, I went in the same order as well. I mean, I just figured, well, we'll hit the one on the left first.
And I mean, it makes sense for that with that narrative device, both the pacing with the fighting and the pacing with the story kind of makes sense. Where like you are just kind of you have the space where you can just poke at this trauma without things like changing necessarily. I guess.
Yeah, well, and because it's not overly harsh, and you can go in and out and whatever you want. It feels like Alice has a lot of agency in
Yeah,
her story, which is good.
yeah, I appreciate that. So I guess my next question is that kind of good with the fighting. I think
Yeah, I mean, we didn't explain the mechanics of the battles, but
I don't really know how to put it into words. Like it's one-on-one fights, super random, pretty mathy in a way that I found like pretty crunchy and cool.
there's ATB, and you use your life to do attacks basically, because it's like your ability to project into the memory world or the frozen world, and not like whatever HP. So yeah, it is pretty. It's fast and it's mathy and it's not dependent on like you can kind of just blast enemies. That's a fine strategy. You don't really need to heal back and forth or anything. I think it's. I haven't played Helen's of Serious Castle, but it's like my favorite RPG where you only play as one character just because it rewards a variety of approaches. And I mean, yeah, it just it is hard to explain, isn't it?
It's smarter. It makes me think of like for the Frog the Bell Tolls, where you just like literally just bounce back and forth hitting each other until you run out. So which is like the dumbest version of this kind of battle system.
Yeah, but you can be reactive, where you can
Yeah,
come in with certain items or skills that you know are going to change the tide of this specific battle,
tweak your accessories for each one.
and encourages experimentation and like instant retrying instead of, well, I didn't bring enough potions so I died kind of thing.
Mm. I felt like there's a ton of skills and items and options for what is ultimately like a 4 hour game or 3 or 4 hour game, but it didn't feel overwhelmed. Like it was like it felt like I had this toy box I could play around with and figure out what was the best approach for me. If I replayed it, I probably wouldn't use the circlet and see kind of if it forced me to be a little bit smarter.
Yeah. Would I make that many skills for a game? No, I wouldn't. But
No, me neither.
but it's pretty impressive. That's
Yeah,
there's
it's
actually like
cute.
I mean, there's kind of like this implied depth in the game, even though it's a short story, both in the narrative and in the battle system. Like this could be a 20-hour game, but it's not.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
And that's good because usually RPGs are always the 20-hour game,
Yes.
or when they're shorter, they're usually, I mean, more of a less of a vertical slice and more just like here's a short story kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah. Which is especially funny because, like, the memories are, like, each dungeon is, like, a half hour, 40 minutes long out of the five dungeons, and then they have, like, a paragraph of Alice's backstory at the end. So, so ultimately you could fit, like, most of the game's, like, content on, like, a page, which I think is pretty cute, but
Yeah, it's also good that it didn't dwell on its content that much.
yeah. All right. So, what was your arc of investment there? Because I know what mine was, but as the backstory beats progressed, like
Um,
how did you react?
so when I finished the first dungeon, I was like, okay, I actually kind of like this. It's being really careful and tenuous with the story. But once I got like 3 or 4 dungeons in, I was like, I'm not sure I really like this. It's really I felt kind of voyeuristic a little bit and a
It's
little bit,
edgy.
yeah, edgy, and it just lingers. It lingers on the moment too long, if that makes sense. It almost so like it stops becoming, or it just like centers, yeah, the edginess of it or the perversity of it, and it just
Mm.
loses the thread of doing a sympathetic portrayal. But I think the ending at least kind of balances out the fact that it kind of goes all in on,
The grossness.
yeah, the grossness.
Yeah. Yeah. The ending kind of brought it back home for me after I was starting to lose it. Basically like one dungeon, two dungeon, three dungeon. I was getting more and more invested, more and more invested, and like, oh god, this is an awful situation. And then I think with four, it just takes that one more step, like one more step too far into kind of melodrama and bullshit, and then I just pulled back, like, oh okay, this is that kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, when you're telling a story like this, there's only so much you need to say, basically.
Mm,
And if you say more than that, then, well, I'll be talking about like that because I feel like on some level, Standstill Girl is interrogating its own storytelling in a
mm-hmm,
way. But yeah, I'll explain that later. The game is like beautiful. It's like a gothic Harvest Moon,
mm-hmm. The aesthetic is gorgeous.
and then you get blindsided by just like bad Japanese short story tropes. I've seen them before.
I can just summarize like the story bits so that people we put the content warning at the beginning, and also like we're spoiling the whole game, I guess I should say.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Cool. Like the each one of them is a little like slice of this very sad backstory for this girl who's lost her memory. The first dungeon is her mom has killed herself, and now she's coming to be picked up by some strangers. So that's sad. I was like, oh, okay. And it comes after, 45 minutes to an hour of like pretty like jaunty, nice RPG. So it did kind of blindside me and like, oh, okay. And the second one is, oh, she's being sold into slavery, actually.
Yeah,
And that was like, oh, and the presentation of it is just like kind of restrained enough that I was okay, that I wasn't like tipped over in the ow the edge territory.
it's kind of like, okay, where are they gonna go with this?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of already know, but
Yeah.
at that point, I was like, this game's been pretty good so far, so yeah, let's see where it's going. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was still like basically on board. Although I took a break for like a month between first and second dungeons. I think we both took long breaks, and I think that kind of says something about the very open-ended pacing that it like nothing really progresses until you're at basically at the end of the game, which means that it's very easy to put down versus something
yeah,
more roller coastery.
yeah, that's true.
And that's not necessarily a weakness. I think that's just a thing about the game. So then the third one is that she's been bought by this dude, and he introduces her to her daughter and says, "Oh, I've named her this." And it's like, "Oh, is she going to have a family now? Is that just what's happening?" And then they leave, and then the daughter says that that's his dead wife's name. And at that point, I was just like, oh man, that's an awful situation. Like, he bought a girl to replace his dead wife. Oh no.
And without going into it, you can kind of assume where the next part goes because of where the game's been going the whole time.
Well, it's not just like I was worried about them like dwelling on sexual assault stuff because that would be shitty. Um, they actually go further than that, and it's that this guy in the at the end of the fourth dungeon, it's he's actually a sadistic serial killer who's been buying people and killing them,
All right.
torturing and killing them
I
over and
actually
over
like
again.
didn't remember this factoid actually.
Okay, because I don't actually remember if they explicitly reference sexual assault. It's, I mean, yeah, that's probably implied in a lot of the things going on, but they do like go immediately into like sadistic serial killer, which was very heavy-handed, I think. And like I think that was the moment where for me it was like they kind of tipped their hand too much, and I was out of it.
I like forgot it happened, and I'm like almost disassociating listening to how just bad it is.
It's yeah, and then that is also like kind of the worst presented scene too, where it's like the daughter and Alice having this conversation, and it's
Yeah,
yeah, it feels cheap, I think. And then the fifth, and then what do you think the fifth ending was? It's her killing herself to escape this horrible situation, and then
sorry, I'm
she's
laughing.
it's okay.
There's there is like sometimes you don't want to like reach for the sharpest tool that you possibly can because your story is either you as a writer are not equipped to talk about this or that your story hasn't been developed at all to talk about it.
Yeah,
And that yeah. Yep.
yeah, and like I wrote, and me and Polly wrote a very like big and melodramatic VN with lots of violence and whatnot. So this is something I've kind of thought a lot about.
I mean if you want to do it, I don't know if I want to say responsibly, but you got to think a lot about what you're portraying and talking about basically.
Hmm.
Your Standstill Girl feels a little off the cuff.
Yeah, I think getting into the basically the implied sexual violence stuff and the slavery is very fraught and harsh territory, and I think that using it kind of for the 5 paragraph short story tragic backstory is a little bit cheap.
Yep.
And then the warden of the game had gone and saved you basically and brought you back to life to keep you at the end of time,
Breaking the laws of time.
breaking the laws of time. All right,
Which is apparently or it becomes an important part of the plot.
yeah. So you have the intro bit in the hub, and then you have the 5 dungeon worlds, the Super Mario 64 levels, where you go into and face the different memories and beat them up.
Yep.
Um, and then you have like then it basically turns into a Final Fantasy game for the climax. Is that fair?
That's fair. I mean, it looks literally like the last dungeon of Final Fantasy 4 or Final Fantasy 5.
Or yeah, it's
The
it's the
floating crystals, yeah.
floating crystals. I think 3 does that. I'm not sure.
3, yeah. It doesn't look as distinctly actually like that, but yeah, it does that
Okay,
too.
gotcha. Um, where your warden is going to be punished for breaking the laws to save you, and then you basically beat up this godly incarnation of the laws of time, and then save your friend by beating it up real good.
There's actually 3 endings though, but yeah.
Mm. There's the one where I got the one where you don't do anything and your friend gets time annihilated.
Yeah.
And then I got the one where I beat her up real good. What's the third one?
You can also just have Alice go in by herself and say I want to right the wrongs and go yeah, and return time to where it was, including Alice being dead.
Oh, so there's just another martyr ending, basically.
Yeah, and then Tiska falls on his knees and goes, "Why'd you do that? Without talking to me."
So there's basically 2 different martyr endings, and then they have one that's like, okay, those are bullshit. Here's really how this should wind up.
Yeah, I think the Tiska one's not as bad because like that's what he wanted
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, I
Even though
get
he's
that.
he's like a coward baby, but yeah, the Alice ending feels kind of out of place.
Okay, I don't feel bad about missing that one.
But I mean, I appreciate that they let Alice do that because that is
Yeah.
something the text seems like she wants to do. But yeah,
Hmm.
the best ending is of course when you beat up God and destroy the world.
Yes. It's basically it's cool because like you play Final Fantasy and then you get to the end and you fight the incarnation of void and it's like this is emptiness, this is nihilism, this is everything we need to fight. We're not fighting evil, we're fighting nothing, the forces of nothingness. And that sort of goes into a lot of Final Fantasy's ethos. Like I've just replayed 6 and Kefka's not a nihilist at the end and X Death gets swallowed up by the void and all that. This one, the thing that the abstract force that you're fighting is that Alice had a really, really bum deal, and Tiska had a bum deal, and the world says that's how it's supposed to be. This is just how things are, and then you say no. I deserve happiness. I deserve to claim that, and then that's what you're fighting. So you're fighting like the terms of it are different, I think, than in like a Final Fantasy game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does make sense.
And I think that resonated with me. That's kind of what helped pull the game together for me at the end.
Yeah, I love the ending. I have like
Mm.
a long spiel. I don't even know how much I want to get into now, but maybe I'll just get into all of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking through. Feel like I've said kind of what was on my brain, which was like the way that the melodrama kind of lost me, and the way that the ending kind of pulled it back in a cute way. Because it's like it's very much an RPG. Um, it's funny because like we played Mittens, and then like a big thing for me was like kind of wanting more of a structure, more shape to it, and more intention and storytelling and game design. And then this is like all the way on the other end. It is tons of structure, tons of shape, tons of game design.
It is actually very specific and elegant, even if the writing sucks at times.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
So, and I guess another game like this I played and did not like was Lisa,
Okay.
or specifically Lisa the First, which is pretty much very similar to Standstill Girl, except the ending is it just ends with everything sucks and no one gets any resolution.
Oh, that sucks. I haven't played the painful yet, so if we could I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about really what
Okay.
happens in Lisa. I have there's a bit I did already did a podcast on Lisa anyways,
Okay.
pretty long one where I talked about everything.
Gotcha.
But so when I got to the parts, the distasteful parts, the bad parts in this game, I was just like, oh my god, I'm playing Lisa again. This sucks. And I actually don't know if I can't say that the writer for Standstill Girl is cis male. I
Hmm.
just got that impression,
Hmm.
but it could be wrong, so I'm not going to say that necessarily. But just like you, I was pretty much done with the plot until the end. And I was coming back when I left the door to time and talked to Tiska, and Tiska was like, "I'm sorry it had to be like this or whatever." But Tiska's like grieving basically, but he knew this was going to happen the entire time. When he saved Alice, he like basically Tiska has survivor's guilt, but it's the kind of survivor's guilt I understand because it's where he feels indebted to everyone who has helped him way more than he can manage to like love himself or take care of himself. And so when he saw Alice, his only instinct was that I need to save this girl because he feels like that's the only way he could pay the other warden back, who also saved him and turned into a shade. In a Dark Souls way, that was going to happen to Tiska at the end of the game.
Yeah, who's gonna get hollowed?
And so Tiska ends up embodying like the cis male point of view of guilt, which does not absolve the story from going too far, but it acknowledges that like when a guy writes a story like this, they can't get anything out of it, and they're not gonna restore anything. Like like I guess in a roundabout way, Tiska can't come to resolution where he believes in his own good intentions, and that's why I kind of was okay with the ending where he turns into a shade, because he doesn't want to get close to her out of fear of inevitably hurting her, and he's scared of like figuring out why he saved her in the first place. Like he doesn't want a selfish reason to be there, so he feels like the only choice available to him is that he has to turn into a shade. And I think the game is right on some level that that's the only way Tiska could not poison the situation besides the ending that's actually good.
Hmm. I think it's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I could talk a lot about that because uh, it's like the privileged male problems are the only part of this game I can talk with authority on.
Yeah, neither of us really has the context for dealing with the ways that the game is ugly.
Right. And I would say, I mean, the problem with a story, an ugly story like that, is it feels like emotional tourism, especially when it's coming from a cis man.
Mhm.
Like, if the character reaches healing, or even if they don't reach healing, it seems like the point of view of the man is that they're trying to demonstrate like their lack of complicity, or they're trying to get their own forgiveness, or they're trying to absolve their own guilt, or try to get their own healing through a third party, or they're just trying to show that they understand when they don't. And I feel like that just really fucking sucks.
Mhm.
And and so like I guess I really like the kill God ending in Standstill Girl, because instead of like trying to reach all the way over and just force that resolution, it just says, what kind of God allows this to happen, and it goes further, what kind of world allows this to happen, and then Alice and Tiska get to be JRPG villains and destroy the world.
Mhm. I like that a lot.
And I think that lets the healing come from it lets it come from the text, but it doesn't like center the guilt or like I don't know, the male pain, I guess. It just kind of makes it a structural issue again. And I think that's why I think it's a really cool conclusion, because most stories and games stumble on this topic. I say that as Standstill Girl also is still kind of shitty.
Yeah, but it comes around in a way that's kind of that was surprised both of us. I think
Right.
even in its like complete, it's so banal. I don't know. Like in that it does the Final Fantasy Crystal Maze and then you kill God,
Yeah.
but it just the framing of it like pulls it together in this really neat way. I think.
Yeah, it's swapped. Usually the heroes are fighting for order and for the world to stay good.
Mm,
But Alice and Tisk are like, no, this world sucks.
yeah, and then they have like the purpose of the backstory is like trying to sort of demonstrate that like how is this fair? It's just way too heavy-handed about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that the game went on its way to establish that the world sucks, but yeah, I don't know. It could have been that could have definitely been way better.
All right, let's see. Is that kind of? I feel like this one kind of like is very intentional and together in a lot of ways. So it's pretty easy to kind of summarize to kind of walk through our feelings on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. It's like a kind of a game that can really speak for itself. So
Yeah,
like if you play it, which I recommend playing it,
yeah.
I mean it's like self-demonstrating, and it's just obviously gorgeous, and it's a well put together game, and it has stuff to take away from at the end of it, thankfully.
Hmm. And it's fun. Like the fighting is fun, and
Yeah,
it's a dungeon game where you're running around fighting random encounters and beating up bosses, and so it's nice that the dungeon that the fighting is fun.
well, we call it a dungeon game, but most of the dungeons are actual towns, which
Hmm.
kind of inverts the whole relationship of what is a safe space and where, like, in an RPG, basically.
Hmm.
And that's another thing that lines up with the themes that Alice is running around towns, but having to struggle the whole way through. But yeah,
Hmm.
no, yeah, it's a really good game.
Hmm. I like the pacing in the train the most because you run through the whole train, and then as you run back, it gets recontextualized.
Right. Yeah, the train's cool.
Trains are always great in RPGs.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a really well made game. So after talking about my feelings on it, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I feel like it's probably the best one that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite RPG Maker games, but
Hmm.
it's also like, it's like in a distant way, I'm just like, wow, that's a perfect game. And then that kind of makes it boring, but I don't know. That sounds weird.
Yeah, I gave it 3 stars in backloggery, whatever that context that's worth. I was like, all right, yeah, I like that. That was together. It did not make me cry, but I liked it. This bit was bad. That
Mine
part.
makes even less sense. I give it 5, but I also have like 300 games rated 5 stars, so my context doesn't make sense either. Yeah.
I came away from it feeling satisfied, which I was glad for.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's good. Did you have a choice for what we wanted to play next time?
No, I thought it was up to you.
Shit. um,
Don't worry.
all right, here.
Actually, if it comes down to it, I know of a game we could play.
All right. Let's like I'll send you a thing. I'll just tell you in a little bit, and then you can like add it at the end of the podcast. Like, oh, BT Dubs are playing this, so people can get ready.
I,
Does that sound
yeah, well,
okay?
I'll put it in the description.
All right, cool. All right.
We just don't know right now. It's fine.
So now I think we can wrap up. Keep this
Yep.
one like nice and keep this one concise.
Yep.
Only be
I
like
agree.
45 minutes after we add in the ad break.